It's time again for Capital City News, your connection to Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Poonam Kumar. For our interview this week, we'll be talking to Chelsea Eddy about Salt Lake City's refugee and immigrant outreach efforts. And our History Minute is about the Doctor, yes, the Doctor Who of BBC fame, and his brushes with the Beehive State and Salt Lake City. But first, let's start with our legislative update. Recently, the City Council was briefed on expanding solid waste and recycling regulations. The proposed changes include requiring businesses and multifamily complexes to establish recycling programs. The Council will consider an updated proposal at a future meeting. All across the city this month, you'll find all kinds of street fairs and outdoor festivals, ranging from the Porch Fest and the Greek Festival to the Avenue Street Fair and the Downtown Farmers Market. Be sure to check out the city's website for a complete schedule. Earlier this month, Airport Director Maureen Riley and Mayor Ralph Becker announced a one-year pilot program to allow new, online-enabled companies to operate at the airport, like any other ground transportation option. For more information, visit the website on the screen. Mayor Ralph Becker, Tracy Aviary Executive Director Tim Brown, students from the Pacific Heritage Academy, and everyone's favorite monkey, Curious George, gathered at the Day Riverside Library to announce the launch of a new city initiative to help children make stronger connections with the outdoor and nature. For more information on this innovative program, visit the mayor's website. Salt Lake City wants to do everything it can to include and represent the city's diverse population. To tell us more is Chelsea Eddy.
So my name is Chelsea Eddy, and I'm the Refugee Community Liaison for Mayor Becker's office. Part of it is just connecting with the refugee communities, getting to know the people in the communities, getting to know the leaders, making sure they know me, and then trying to connect those communities to some of the resources we have in the city. Housing programs, grant opportunities, how to get your voice heard through different channels. And then the second part of that is listening to what the refugee communities have to say and trying to make sure the city is best serving the needs of the refugee communities. And sometimes we're already doing that. Sometimes we have programs in place, but we need to change the way we're advertising them or doing outreach into these communities. But basically it's trying to find that connection point between the city and our refugee communities and leaders to making sure that we're serving them and representing them the best way we can. Well, I think the priority of city government should be to reflect the voices of all the residents that live in Salt Lake City. And refugees have some particular barriers to accessing city government. Of course, number one is language. A lot of them, English is usually the fourth, fifth, or sixth language they've learned to speak in their lifetime. And so when you're accessing information about meetings or city resources, English, it's not the first language. Secondly, our mode of getting information to communities, which is often through community councils or through social media, through email lists, those aren't always channels that refugees are tuned into and are accessing their information from. So the outreach that is done to mainstream communities doesn't always reach refugee populations. And at the same time, we have huge amounts of refugees living in Salt Lake City, working in Salt Lake City, accessing services in Salt Lake City. And so it's important as a government to reflect all of the voices in our community, but because of the barriers that a lot of refugee communities have, they're not accessing information via the other channels that mainstream community is. So it's important to have someone that's specifically focused on communicating with those communities and making sure that they are aware that we're here and we're open and we want to hear from them, and their voices are important. They have a different perspective than people that have been born and raised in the US. So there's always opportunities for community involvement. There's always different cultural events happening every single weekend, and refugee communities love to have mainstream population go because it's a chance for them to show who they are, where they're from, what their community is to the greater Salt Lake City community. And then there's plenty of volunteer opportunities also. We actually have a program in the city called the Refugee Volunteer Program, where we have an opportunity for mainstream volunteers to volunteer with refugee families. We have several opportunities. One is a volunteer can mentor a refugee family for about a year, and they would just meet with the family weekly. They go to parks, go to festivals, go to the library, help the refugee families with sometimes reading mail, accessing other services they may need. But the point of that is really just to connect our mainstream community with our refugee community so that they have that chance to meet refugees. We also have another option that is less time intensive, but also gives people the opportunity to work with refugee communities. And then throughout the community, there's plenty of other nonprofit organizations that constantly need volunteers. You know, there's citizenship tutoring, there's English skills tutoring, there's advising refugee boards, there's tutoring youth, there's going to community centers, there's tons of opportunities, and I'm always happy to help point people in the right direction on finding a match that would be good for them.
And now it's time for our History Minute.
In 2012, Geocomtex was a company with an underground installation just outside of Salt Lake City. Under the direction of their CEO, Henry Van Staten, they assembled one of the largest collections of extraterrestrial artifacts in the world, which is why he drew the attention of the Doctor and his companion Rose Tyler. Van Staten's favorite item in this collection was a captured Dalek, which ended up killing hundreds of his employees before the Doctor was able to stop it. The Doctor might be one of the most important heroes in all of time and space. He's a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation Castor. He's more than 1,000 years old, and he's the one who saved the lives of Salt Lakers and 6 billion others time and again.
Hello. I'm the Doctor. Basically, run.
That wasn't the Doctor's only adventure in Utah. It's also where his 11th regeneration was killed at Lake Silencio before he was able to solve his own murder and live again. All of that, of course, was in the television show produced by the BBC called Doctor Who. It's the longest-running science fiction television show in history, encompassing more than 800 episodes that began airing in 1963. Many of the show's stars have visited Salt Lake City during our internationally renowned Salt Lake Comic-Con, and many more will visit over the years to come.
That's a wrap on another episode of Capital City News, your connection to Salt Lake City government. Be sure to keep watching to know what's happening in Salt Lake City. For SLC TV, I'm Poonam Kumar.